Well, this one. It's funny, the last few paintings have been more square in shape or vertical. And now when I look at this, it almost seems panoramic. Although I've done so many of this size, I just like this size. It's 24 inches by 36 inches. As with the last staining, I guess it was the staining of the last painting that I did, I still have some ultramarine blue on my palette. I still have some burnt sienna on my palette. So I'm going to begin again, darker in the foreground, with a mix of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And as we run out of the ultramarine blue, I'm not going to add more to the stain. I'm just going to go with burnt sienna. Really, in general, kind of my favorite color for staining things. So let's scrape that off the palette. Throw it on the canvas. And you know what, I may as well just take some out of the tube here, burnt sienna, and dab a little more on in a few spots as we work our way out. Okay, who am I kidding? I'm gonna need more here, and here, and here, and I might even need more than that. We'll see. I do like my stains to be fairly opaque. A little translucent, but fairly opaque. I don't like just to wash it on and have it run down and barely tint it. I like it stronger than that. Alright, let's get this brush loaded with some paint thinner here. Okay. If I put some up here, is it going to run all the way down? No. Yep, almost, if I push too hard. Once this little foam brush gets some pigment in it, it'll be easier to control exactly how the paint goes on without losing runs of, waterfalls of paint thinner, turpentine, and pigment running off the canvas. So we'll just dip it again here. Get rid of most of the excess. Spread it around. It's not acrylic, so it's not going to dry. It's a really cheap foam brush, so it might not even last for the staining of the entire painting. We'll see. I have others. If I need to, I'll just grab another one. Yeah, I sure did not have much blue left over. Alright, we're just going to grab some more red sienna. Actually, I do have a little bit of cobalt blue. It's not as dark, but at least it'll go a little darker than the burnt sienna that I have sitting there. Or than just straight burnt sienna. Let's do that. Let's use that up too. Very little left on the pile. In fact, I'm getting close to pulling skin off of it, and I don't like that. It just makes for a lot of extra work for no good reason. Alright, another dip into the paint there. Another squishing out of the brush so we don't lose control. See, I still have too much on there. That's just not very good. But it's a stain. I'm really not too worried about it. We will survive. Yeah, once the brush gets a bit loaded with paint, it's easier. It's just the first few passes that are a bit of a nuisance. See, that's evening out kind of nicely now. You know, and I have little bits here and there that, you know, whatever. You know what I really could even do is just leave it, because by tomorrow the stain won't be dry by any means, but those little bumps, I can take a knife and I can flick them off of the canvas. No harm done. No harm done at all. Okay, I think I was mentioning that I'd like to do something more West Coasty. You know, it doesn't have to be West Coasty. I might just work with something that is more, well, the main thing is rocks, water, and trees. My favorite subject. You know, I was thinking a little earlier about what I wanted to do for a scene, and I was reminded of a story. Yeah, a story. It's not a story. It's a memory of going to Ontario. My one of my sisters and her husband spent a good deal of time living in Ontario, southern Ontario for the most part. Sort of, there was a community called Haliburton. It's, I think, maybe a couple of hours north of Toronto in Canada, maybe a couple of hours west of Ottawa, somewhere in that area. Anyway, I know that we took several trips. They lived in a number of different communities in that area, but I do remember one time, and I remember it because it was kind of funny, stood out in my memory. They lived and that's another thing. These guys had impeccable taste as far as living in beautiful places. Not just the location and the surroundings, but even the homes themselves. You know, it almost always involved log, stonework, an actual fireplace, you know, a wood fireplace. Never right in town, or very rarely. Always in sort of a calm environment. I just love that. So, what I'm thinking of is, I don't know if they lived right, I think it might have been a lake called Haliburton Lake near the community of Haliburton. But they lived in a home, or a cabin. I don't know if it was waterfront on Haliburton Lake, or if it was very close to the lake. And I think it was my mom, my dad, maybe my next oldest sister, and myself were out visiting them. Now at this point, I might have been, I don't know, was I even 15 years old, 16, 14, I don't know. A young kid anyway, fairly young. I know these days people think that when they're 14 they're practically grown up. Nope, not true. Not in those days, that's for sure. So it was winter, and Dad and I decided to go out onto the lake to go ice fishing. Because they had some gear, and so we walked out onto this lake, and beautiful. I know it was snowing a little bit. Very soft, you know, that soft, gentle, calm kind of snow. And See, I'm worse at remembering geographic locations than I am the visual memory, or the feeling, you know, the taste, the temperature, all that kind of thing. Can I just lower this a little bit? I think so. But they had a dog, and so Dad and I and this dog went out. It was sort of a German Shepherd, I think. Sort of a German Shepherd. It was a German Shepherd, I think. We walked out onto the lake and we got ready to start drilling holes. We might have already drilled some holes, and or a hole or two, and let the lines in. And as we're standing out there, we're quite a ways from shore, but I remember we saw somebody approaching us from a bit of a distance, and eventually they came closer, and it was a fisheries officer, or at the time what they called a conservation officer. Here's a young guy. And he came to talk to us for a bit. And of course I'm completely oblivious to how things work. You know, to me haircuts were like, they were free, they were like rain. You know, getting fed just happened naturally. Nobody ever had to work for it. You know, no, I wasn't that naive. But anyway, so he approached, and we had a nice friendly chat. I liked the guy right away. You know, I just started shooting my mouth and telling him we were from Ontario, or we were from Manitoba rather. We were visiting and hopefully going to catch some fish. And he was great about things. So he chatted for a while, mostly chatting with my dad, of course, because that's what happens. It's the adults that have the conversation, the kids listen, and sometimes input and sometimes just interrupt. Anyway, I blithered on, you know, about the friendly dog we had, and we had with us, and it was my sister's dog and all this. And so at one point in the conversation, I noticed my dad sort of jump back, and he was looking down, so I looked down as well, and there was steam coming up from this conservation officer's pants, and it was because the dog had lifted his leg, and he was peeing on this guy's leg. And, you know, warm pee is probably only comfortable for a minute, and in the wintertime it gets pretty uncomfortable. Anyway, my dad was very apologetic, as was I, and this young guy said, it's okay. He says, these things happen. And, you know, his parting words to us were, welcome to Ontario. I sure hope you have a good time while you're here. I didn't realize at the time that I needed a fishing license. I don't think I did, but my dad did not have a fishing license. The dog didn't have dog tags even. I don't even know if it was in season. Well, yeah, it must have been. It was winterized fishing. But this guy never asked for our licenses. Never, you know, he might have just asked if we caught anything, what have you. But he still left after our dog peeing down his leg. He still left with a smile on his face, and friendly as all get out. No interrogation, no nothing. I didn't learn until later that the dog had no tags, and that it was even a thing, that you needed it, because this was still out in the countryside. It wasn't in town. And also, being young enough, I must have been pretty young actually. I didn't even think about fishing licenses, or maybe I just assumed my dad had one. I have no idea. It was a one thing. We weren't there to fish. We just thought, there's something that'd be fun to do for an hour or two. Anyway, I thought that was really cool. That's one memory that stands out in my mind as a cool guy. Now that conservation officer, that was a real Canadian. That is the type of person I grew up around, more so than even exists these days. So that was really cool. Love that memory. Fond memory. I have a lot of fond memories from visiting them because they lived in a number of different places. Always a little bit out of the way. Always, as I say, impeccable taste. Okay, sorry. I'm just really blithering now. I'm going to leave these little, I got a few little specks on here. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll take my little gut slicer here and pull them off tomorrow. No harm done. And now that I've been thinking about that memory, maybe it won't be West Coast. Maybe it'll just be a lake in Ontario, on the Cambrian Shield. You know, such beautiful country. I still don't know. I really don't know. But I had to do something. I've spent a lot of time working on vehicles the last few days, and as of this morning, the gas fireplace in my studio doesn't work anymore, which is why I'm wearing my Warm and Fuzzies. All these chores seem to pop up at once, you know? Okay, 2436 stained, ready to go. So, we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.